Welcome to Writers Radio. I'm Ingrid Rose, your host for our program, Two Journeys to Self-Publishing a Memoir. The first story you're about to hear is read by Elizabeth Herejk from her book, From Kendal to Canada, An Adventurous Spirit. After her story, we'll hear from Jadzia Prenosil, reading from her book, My Childhood Behind the Iron Curtain. Elizabeth Herejk was born in the small market town of Kendal in Cumbria, England. She came to Canada in 1971 at the age of 25 as a trained nurse. She's reading the chapter Some Childhood Memories from early on in her book, From Kendal to Canada, An Adventurous Spirit.
Memories of my early life start with the home I remember in Kendal. Not the apartment where I was a newborn, nor my toddler time in the end house of a terrace opposite a farm, but the Victorian house that our family lived in until 1984. Built in 1860 of large irregular local stone blocks with a waterproof slate-shingled roof, large single-paned sash windows, and no insulation or central heating, it was cold. This was surely where I was toughened up, and I still prefer a very cool bedroom. Memories are skimpy, but some context first. I was born at the forefront of the baby boomer generation. After the World War II, weary men returned home to start a delayed family. Food and clothing, ration books were kept in a green kitchen drawer and had to be used until I was 6. Supplies of furniture, appliances, and clothing were scarce. Credit cards didn't exist. There were no luxuries. Children's toys were limited in supply, and resuming normal life after 6 years of wartime restrictions was challenging. Married women were so happy to finally start a family, and men rejoiced at returning hopefully to their former work responsibilities, or to embark nervously on a new career. My father gave up his dream of becoming an orthopedic surgeon and settled for family practice instead. My childhood was Spartan compared to 2020 North American family life, but we nevertheless thrived and became resilient. We learnt the importance of make, do, and mend, how to be industrious, how to grow food, make clothes, knit jumpers, darn socks, eat simply but well on home-cooked food. Extravagance? Not a word used in my parents' vocabulary. But back to the cold house and how I tried to stay warm. The kitchen, the hub of the house and only consistently warm room, was heated by a multi-purpose Rayburn stove. Fueled by coke, a less polluting form of coal, it had 2 hot plates and ovens. The family room had an open fireplace in which a cozy coal fire was lit every afternoon in winter. I was fascinated watching the coal man delivering the heavy canvas sacks. Sturdily built and blackened with soot, he looked pretty scary until I could see the whites of his eyes under his bushy eyebrows and his white teeth between his smiling lips. Opening one sack after another above the coal chute at the side of the house, he let the irregular black lumps rumble down into the coal cellar, enveloping it with a cloud of black dust that always covered him as well. Father's daily job was refilling the coal scuttle and hauling it up the narrow, steep stairs. Sometimes, instead of coal, on special occasions, Father tenderly put a lump of peat, harvested from the nearby bleak moors, into the grate, and watched it glow and quietly burn as it emitted an intense heat, the ancient stored carbon being released. It seemed to be a sacred ritual, and I think I now know why. I have been able to read his letters written to my mother in World War II. Pete probably reminded him of his courting days, when he read poetry to his beloved Margaret in front of a peat fire at Brook House in Norfolk in the extremely cold winter of 1941. The daily fire ritual and memories of making firelighters. Oh, what an important, essential, but boring task. Once old enough to roll up newspaper diagonally into a long, thin tube, I was able to help. Oh, how grown up I felt whilst my younger siblings watched. The rolled paper was neatly folded, twisted and knotted into a small bundle that with several other firelighters was the foundation for our daily fire. Small lumps of coal were carefully placed on top and a match struck. As it was the only heat in the room, we tried to sit close to the fire. It was odd to only have one's face and tummy warm and our backs feeling cold. As soon as it started to turn dark in the winter afternoons, one of us would have to go around the house to close all the curtains, especially in the bedrooms, to keep the cold out. Woe betide us if we left a light on whilst doing that, and I can still hear my father's stern voice, "Turn the light off when you leave the room." With no TV, we enjoyed playing board games in front of the fire, a popular way to spend the evenings. Clue and Monopoly were favourites, as well as card games like canasta and palmanism. To let off steam, dancing around the table to Jimmy Shand and his band's Scottish music on the gramophone was fun. The large mahogany dining room table, with a large sheet draped over it, served as the roof for a tent, a hideout, a secret place where the three of us schemed and sometimes giggled. Bedtime routines and clothing. No shower possible, but a bath twice a week, with all three of us using the same bath water. Quickly into pajamas, pulling on bed socks, a bed jacket plus a hot water bottle to cuddle, and into bed ready for story time with Mother. Regardless of the weather, the bedroom window always had to be open for fresh air. It was common to see our breath as we exhaled. Sometimes when I got up in the morning, there were beautiful, delicate frost patterns on the glass, which I scraped off with a fingernail so I could peer outside into the garden. Through my young eyes, this phenomenon was just normal. It's just how it was in winter. On those cold nights, I put my clean knickers and vest between the eiderdown and blanket, and in the morning I had a big decision to make. Did I either get dressed into the warmed underwear in my cold room, or scamper down to the warm kitchen and get dressed in front of the Rayburn? For extra warmth, my sister and I were bundled up again with another layer. Over our vests, a Liberty bodice had to be worn, a simple sleeveless garment with rubber buttons and made of warm, fleecy fabric. A thick, hand-knitted woolen sweater, a skirt and knee socks completed our layers. I still remember taking my children to the Vancouver Museum when they were young, and there, on display in a glass cabinet, was a Liberty bodice from the 1950s. It shocked me. I didn't think I was already museum material. Shoe polishing. A Sunday evening routine with Father in the back kitchen. A large, cold utility room with black slate flagstones on the floor. The washing machine, a boiler for sheets, and a hand-operated mangle took up most of the space. But there was a counter specifically for shoe polishing. What a procedure! We carefully, reluctantly had to follow Father's routine. Our quality time with him? In preparation, a layer of newspaper was spread out, upon which were laid out tins of black and brown polish, and shoe brushes clearly marked by Mother. For example, black, on, brown, off. First task, remove dried mud with wire brush. Second, apply polish to each pair of shoes with the on brush. Wait at least an hour for the polish to dry. And third, vigorously polish each one to a shine with the off brush. End result, pairs of gleaming shoes ready for school and work on Monday.
You've just heard Elizabeth Herejk reading from her self-published memoir, From Kendal to Canada, An Adventurous Spirit. Jadzia Prenosil was born in Slovakia. She and her two sisters came to Canada after the death of their mother and the invasion of their country by Russia in 1968, when she was 17. We're now going to hear Jadzia read from her self-published memoir, My Childhood Behind the Iron Curtain.
Gift of Love. Over the years, I have accepted the fact that one of the gifts Mama passed on to me at birth was a deep sense of longing and melancholy. These feelings seeped into my cradle and have stayed with me ever since. I was a post-war baby born into a new world of the freshly formed country of Czechoslovakia, ready to embrace my fate, while Mama continued to long for the old traditions of the pre-war years. Throughout my life, I have carried this feeling of nostalgia without fully understanding it. Existential crisis? Maybe that accounts for my frequent sulky moods as a child when I wandered around alone with a certain sense of foreboding, imagining being someone else living another life. Even today, I can remember that heavy feeling, the one that did not allow me to express what really bothered me. I inherited Mama's deep sensitivity, her tendency to be moved by a flying bird or a Chopin piano sonata without understanding it. I was affected along with her. One of my favorite childhood memories is of Mama and I sitting in the sun in silence on the white iron bench beneath the dining room window daydreaming. The Second World War and the ensuing years changed Mama's life dramatically. The elegant family estate was taken away from us by the new communist regime, forcing us to move into a simple rented house on the outskirts of Bratislava. Mama's two beloved sisters, her lifelong best friends, Aunt Sissy and Beta, defected to the west, while Mama, already married, stayed behind to build her life. The borders between east and west were permanently closed, and the Iron Curtain fell. Our family was painfully separated from Mama's relatives for the next 40 years. Mama's familiar universe collapsed, and the trauma of that loss remained with her for the rest of her life. Freedom of expression, the companionship of her sister, and a comfortable lifestyle were replaced by restrictions and hardship. Mama's grief was quiet and steady. It came out through gestures, expressions, and memories. When she spoke of her youth, the room filled with heavy longing for the old world. Over time, this longing found a place in my own world. Mama's life was tinged with loneliness, and the burden of her loss slowly became part of the way I looked at the world. Most of the stories we heard during our childhood were connected to Mama's two sisters. When she spoke of the happy and crazy times that she shared with them, her eyes would shine with bright light. Her stories transported us to her world of riding horses, playing pranks on friends, and living her life to the fullest. As a child, I often wished for that magic, that wondrous life to come back. As the years passed, my sisters and I filled the empty space in Mama's heart. We remembered and relived with her the good old times while repeating her favorite expressions when we felt happy. "Oh, this feels just like before the war." Her loss of her sisters became ours. The three of us became the three of them. Together we rejoiced at the sight of the frequent blue aerograms from Aunt Sissy in Canada and Aunt Beta in England, full of news of a different kind. The frequent parcels brought wonderful colors and scents to our grey existence. Mama lived for these moments, these connections with her sister. The sisters tried to meet in Austria, but the political situation of the Cold War kept the borders tightly closed, its citizens safe from Western influence, so Mama couldn't go. Mama passed away in July of 1968 without seeing her beloved sisters. I was 17 years old, my sisters in their early 20s. She left us with what she valued the most, her love for us and a deep, powerful, strong family bond. The Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia in August 1968 turned out our world upside down and forced us to leave our country. On September 1st, 1968, Papo and the three of us left for neighboring Austria. We left everything and everyone we loved behind. And while Papo looked for a country in Europe that would take us in, my sisters and I accepted gratefully Aunt Sissy's sponsorship as refugees to Canada. We left Austria on October 4th, 1968. Papo decided to stay in Europe for a time. Bunka, our grandmother, whom we missed terribly and who was not present when my mama passed away, had been staying with her daughter Aunt Sissy in Vancouver for the past year. We longed for the familiarity of being with Bunka after our difficult experiences of losing Mama and leaving our country. We looked forward to meeting our famous Aunt Sissy. I will never forget the sunny day in October 1968 when we met Aunt Sissy for the first time. There she was, 55 years old, Mama's beloved sister, our benefactor and our savior. Despite all the traumatic events of the previous few months, we were thrilled to meet her. She came to pick us up from Melfast Court Hotel in the West End, where other refugees from Czechoslovakia were staying. There was so much of Mama in and around her. The way she brought her hands up to her face, her cough, her posture. I shivered at the resemblance. The four of us stood in the sterile lobby of the hotel, staring at each other, unable to move or speak. The tears streaming down our faces said it all. Then, pointing at us, she whispered, "You must be Hanka, and you are Nora and Jadzia." As the three of us embraced Aunt Sissy, we sensed Mama's strong presence. At that moment, it felt as if the sisters finally reunited. Our new life was about to begin.
Elizabeth Herejk and Jadzia Prenosil now join me to share their different journeys towards self-publishing.
What made you decide to self-publish?
my husband and I were given a gift to an online memoir writing service called Storyworth. And that was Christmas 2019, which actually was very timely from our point of view. So this online program offers a weekly prompt for writing. And if you don't like the prompt, you can choose another from their list of hundreds, or you can write your own story. And at the end of a year, your writings are assembled, and it's all done on email, I should say. Your writings are assembled and then published in a book. And it comes in a 6x9 hardcover book. And you can add photographs or documents or whatever you want. And so it's just a matter of, but you write your story, send it off, and then the self-publishing is done. I finally published it. Well, it was more than a year ago now, but it was so easy to do. You did all the editing of the stories yourself, so that was up to you. But once you were satisfied, you just went click, and then you get a book in the mail.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And Jadzia, you went a slightly different route.
Quite a different route. My journal writing over the years have turned into story writing, and the stories were returning to the same theme after a while. And I realized it was something I needed to digest, because when I came at 17, I have gone through quite a bit of trauma. Suddenly I lost my mom. She was ill, but went to the hospital for a checkup that she would do regularly with asthma, and didn't come back. So that was I was completely shattered. And months later, Russian army invaded Czechoslovakia like it's now doing to Ukraine. So I had 3 gigantic losses, and I never really dealt. And we moved to Canada months after that. So I am in a new country, new language, no parents. My father stayed in Europe, just my 3 sisters. And we moved in with my aunt, my mother's sister here in Canada. So everything was different. At one point, this is 2-3 years ago, my husband said, "What are we going to do? They're here, they're wonderful, people love them, you got to do something." So I reluctantly went into looking for an editor, which was quite easy. Through a friend, we found an editor, and the best thing was that he was from a Polish background, so culturally we clicked. He was very gentle and helped me quite a bit, and had the publisher for me, and so it was very, very easy. Once the stories were in order and the photographs matched with the stories, so yes, it was really a nice process. And now I have the PDF like Elizabeth, and I can order more copies whenever I want to.
How did you both feel after it was done? Like it was in the book?
I felt a tremendous sense of relief, a sense of achievement.
Yes.
I had decided, even before we got this Storyworth subscription, I had decided I wanted to write stories about some key moments in my life, like my nursing training, my work as an outpost nurse in Northwest Ontario, and some other stories for my grandchildren.
Relief is the big one, because I put a lot of love and emotions and feelings into those stories, and they meant so much to me. And I knew somehow they also explain my and my sister's life, and the people we were, and why we were the way we were when we came to Canada, to our younger generation, to my nieces, and and the people around us. Why were we maybe nostalgic? Why did we talk about back home? People were kind of sometimes irritated, but we had to go through that. We had to come to some kind of closure. So these stories were that when they were in one bunch, and I wrote, the book arrived in the mail, in the envelope, I just couldn't believe it. It was like a solid, like holding my life in my hands, although it was just my first 17 years, but it was like, here it is. You want to know about me? Read about it.
then we can talk about it. So that's it. So it was for my friends, for my family, for my young nieces, although they are at this point still hesitant to read it because their mothers are mentioned and there's a lot of nostalgia and sadness all along with the joy and a lot of funny stories, but they're hesitant. I haven't heard much from them, although I see them all the time. And I asked them once, and they said, "I have to be ready." They said, one of them said, so I'm just leaving it. But my friends, good reaction from that. So yes, relief and. Really proud of myself that I stopped whining and putting the stories under the carpet, and they're in a book and I have it on the coffee table, and it gives me a lot of joy.
Oh, wonderful. Elizabeth, have you had any reaction from your family?
From some family members, I think most of our family are just very busy with life at the moment, as we know how that is when you're in the throes of raising children and a career. But I know they've delved into some of the stories. A lot of the information is new to them. But I really feel this book and my husband's book will really come into their own when we're no longer here.
Memoirists Jadzia Prenosil and Elizabeth Herejk have been reading, respectively, from their books My Childhood Behind the Iron Curtain and From Kendal to Canada, An Adventurous Spirit. They've also been sharing with me their journeys to self-publishing. This is Writers Radio. I'm Ingrid Rose. Delighted to have been your host for this program, Two Journeys to Self-Publishing a Memoir. Many thanks to my wonderful co-hosts and co-producers, Carol Harmon and Gary Sill. Gary is also our music man and our techie. Without him, we couldn't bring you Writers Radio. So a special thanks goes to you and to our listeners for listening. Thank you.
You have been listening to Writers Radio, a non-commercial collaborative project which presents talented writers reading their own work. These stories, essays, and conversations revisit the long tradition of oral storytelling that connects us to the inspiration behind the words. Be sure to check the website, writersradio.ca, to subscribe to our free notifications list. It's also a way of letting the writers know you are there and appreciating their creative work.
Writers Radio broadcasts from Half Moon Bay on the Sunshine Coast in Canada, traditional tribal land of the Sechelt Nation of the Coast Salish peoples. We express our gratitude for their wisdom teachings and land stewardship.